So picture this, you're in Sweden, beautiful country, right? Great meatballs, stylish furniture you can't assemble, and a reputation for being super fair. Everyone loves fairness. In a college classroom, a professor of economics is standing in front of his students. He's got that look, you know, the look that says, I'm about to teach you something, but it's not going to be from the textbook. He looks out at all these bright young faces full of ideas about how the world should work. It's a place where the concept of everyone being equal isn't just a dream, it's practically a national sport. The professor, let's call him Professor Johansson, starts the semester with a bold statement. He tells the class, I have been teaching for a very long time and I have never, not once, failed an entire class. This gets their attention. It's a challenge, but it's also a promise. It makes the students feel secure, like they're part of a winning team before the game has even started. They look around at each other, nodding. Of course they won't fail. They're smart, they're dedicated, and they're in this together. How could a whole group of people possibly fail? It seems impossible. Now, this particular class was very vocal about their beliefs. They believed in socialism. Not the scary kind you see in old movies, but the Swedish ideal. They argued that it was the best, most just way to organize a society. Everyone should be equal. No one should have too much while others have too little. The students were passionate, convinced that with enough cooperation and shared goals, you could build a perfect system where everyone benefits. They saw it as the ultimate form of teamwork, a beautiful theory that championed fairness above all else. It sounded perfect on paper, a utopia waiting to happen. Professor Johansson listened to all of this. He heard their arguments, their passion, their unwavering belief in the power of collective good, and then he proposed an experiment. All right, he said, a glint in his eye. If you believe so strongly in this principle, let's apply it to this class. We will run this classroom on a socialist model. All your test scores will be averaged together and every single one of you will receive the exact same grade. This way no one will be poor and no one will be rich. Everyone will be equal. The class loved it. It was a chance to prove their ideals were right. What could possibly go wrong? The day of the first test arrived. The students who had studied for weeks, the ones who color-coded their notes, who stayed up late, who skipped parties to read, they went in and aced it. They knew their stuff inside and out. On the other side, you had the students who, let's just say they embraced a more relaxed approach to their education. They barely studied, figuring the smart kids would carry them. They did just enough to show up. It was a classic classroom mix. The grinders and the coasters, all sitting in the same room, about to become part of the same experiment. When the grades came back, the magic of averaging was revealed. The professor collected all the scores, from the highest to the lowest, and crunched the numbers. The final shared grade for the entire class was a B. The students who had studied their hearts out were not happy at all. They got a B. They had put in A-level work, but received a grade that didn't reflect their effort. They felt cheated, like their hard work had been taken from them and given to someone who didn't earn it. It was a bitter pill to swallow. Meanwhile, the students who hadn't studied at all were thrilled. They were ecstatic. They did next to nothing and walked away with a B. It was the best deal ever. They had put in D or F-level effort and were rewarded with a grade far better than they deserved. They high-fived each other in the hallways, celebrating the genius of the system. Why work hard when you can get a good grade for free? The system was working perfectly for them, rewarding their lack of effort with a success they hadn't earned. The incentive to coast was now officially endorsed. So the first test created a clear divide. Not in grades, of course, everyone had the same B. The divide was in motivation. The hard-working students felt a sense of injustice. Their personal drive, the very thing that pushed them to excel, was now being punished. Why should they spend all night studying if their A was just going to be dragged down to a B to help someone who went to the movies? The questions started to bubble up. What's the point? The foundation of their motivation was starting to crack under the weight of forced equality. As the second test approached, a new dynamic took hold of the classroom. The students who had previously studied hard decided, why bother? They figured if their top scores were just going to be averaged down anyway, they might as well enjoy themselves a little more. So they studied less. Not a lot less, just enough to feel like they weren't wasting their time. They aimed for good enough instead of great. The desire to be the best was gone, replaced by a feeling of resignation. The fire that once burned so brightly was now just a flicker. On the other side of the room, the students who had barely studied before now had even less reason to start. Their logic was simple. If they could get a B by doing nothing, why change a winning formula? They had learned that effort was unnecessary. The system would provide for them thanks to the hard work of others. So they studied even less than before, confident that the few remaining dedicated students would still do enough to keep the class average from completely tanking. They were comfortably riding a wave of mediocrity, and they had no plans to get off. The results of the second test were, to no one's surprise, much worse. When Professor Johansson averaged the scores this time, the great equalizer churned out a D for everyone. The students who used to get A's were shocked. Their reduced effort, combined with the total lack of effort from the others, had dragged the entire class down. The coasters who were once happy with a B were now a bit concerned with a D. The safety net they had relied on was starting to fray. Suddenly, the system wasn't feeling so great anymore. The mood in the classroom turned sour. Arguments broke out, fingers were pointed, the hard-working students blamed the lazy ones for their poor grade, and the lazy ones shot back that the smart kids should have tried harder for the good of the group. The sense of shared purpose and unity that they had celebrated at the start of the semester was completely gone. It was replaced with resentment, blame, and a complete breakdown of cooperation. The beautiful theory of shared success was collapsing into a mess of individual accusations and collective failure. The utopia was crumbling. By the time the third and final test rolled around, the experiment had reached its inevitable conclusion. The spirit of the class was broken. No one was motivated. The top students felt utterly defeated. Their best efforts would only result in failure, so why try at all? The students who had never tried in the first place saw no reason to change. The entire academic ecosystem had collapsed. The classroom, once buzzing with intellectual energy and debate, was now silent and apathetic. Everyone was just waiting for it to be over. The will to succeed had vanished. The students went into the final test with a collective shrug. Pencils moved without purpose, and answers were filled in with little thought. The outcome was a foregone conclusion. When Professor Johansson graded the tests, the average was a resounding F. The entire class, from the brightest to the least engaged, received a failing grade. The professor's record was broken. He stood before them and announced, "The entire class has failed." The room was quiet. There were no celebrations, no complaints. There was only the cold, hard reality of their shared result. Professor Johansson then delivered the final lesson, the one that wasn't about economics from a book, but about human nature. He explained, "This experiment has failed because the incentive to succeed was removed. When you reward everyone equally, regardless of their contribution, the motivation to work hard disappears. The hardest workers feel punished and the least productive feel entitled. This is the core problem with the socialist model you all advocated for. It's a system that sounds noble in theory, but ignores the fundamental driver of human progress, the connection between effort and reward." He concluded by saying that it's impossible to lift the poor up by pulling the rich down. You cannot multiply wealth by dividing it. When half the people get the idea that they don't have to work because the other half is going to take care of them, and when the other half gets the idea that it does no good to work because somebody else is going to get what they work for, that is the beginning of the end of any nation, or in this case, any classroom. The students finally understood. It was a lesson in economics and in life that they would never forget.